Did you know that the key to calming your gut issues, easing stress, and improving your overall health might just lie in a nerve you've never even heard of? Well, in this episode, we're diving into the power of the vagus nerve with gut health expert Atavia Minoudis, who talks about all this kind of stuff on her own podcast. Stick around because this conversation could change the way that you look at your own gut health. Real quick, just some updates that are coming up on the Over 40 Fitness podcast show. I've got a real cool guest who's an expert in red light therapy, pretty much been doing it for the last 15 years. And that's the best part of my podcast is being able to talk to these experts, get decades worth of information into hopefully a 30-minute episode to educate not only myself, but my audience. Other than that, we have a brand new type of health insurance that has hit the market that I myself have already canceled my corporate insurance and have switched to this new style. So I'm very excited to get that episode out in a couple months here. And as always, my SKOOL community is ever growing. Check out the link in the show notes. It's where I'm spending all my time with my audience. It's basically a community much like Facebook groups, but a lot more interactive. We have coffee chats. I'll be doing Q&As pretty soon, as well as having other like-minded over 40 people who are interested in, rapid weight loss, longevity, new tech trends coming out. So it's not just me in there. And get in while you can before I hit my first 100 people, because after that, I will be charging to new people only. So let's get on with the episode. So Octavia, I'd just like to thank you for coming on my show. Real excited to learn more about the vagus nerve and other issues that calming that nervous system down can solve. Because in my line of using like diaphragmatic breathing to calm my nervous system just for my lower back pain, because I'm post-op 2 surgeries in my life, and just discovering what the nervous system can do to you was just insane. So learning more about that and other issues we're going to be talking about, like IBS and some of that kind of stuff. But before we get into my audience, I always like to get to know the guest and give it a little background, and then we'll take it away from there. So
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on, and I'm excited to talk all things vagus nerve and gut health and beyond. In terms of my background, so I'm obviously British. I live in England. I'm a nutritional therapist, and I've specialised in gut health, specifically IBS, so irritable bowel syndrome. Reason being, it's partly because I had it myself, and partly because it's just so prevalent nowadays, which we'll get into why that is. Like, so many people, say 90% of people I talk to just on a daily basis, they have gut health problems. So I was diagnosed with IBS when I was in my early 20s. And if anyone listening has this issue, they will just know the back and forth to the doctors, even if it's not IBS, whatever it might be, constant trips to the GP or the physician in the States, being fobbed off. Like, I always felt like I was being fobbed off. Like, I wasn't really being given answers, and I hate that feeling. I can be quite stubborn and I want to know the root cause of things. So I decided to study nutritional therapy. I've got a background in psychology, and having those two things merged together was really helpful, because you could just see often nutrition and physical health is the missing link to wellness in general, which I'm sure you. So yeah, that's my background. I now specialize in working with people with IBS specifically. Yeah, I've been practicing for about 5 years.
yeah, that's great. I know just for myself, not really doing anything about like gut health until my late 30s, just because I started getting all these food allergies and just learning. The system's different blood tests, different skin prick tests, they all come back totally different. I was told I didn't have any, and then I was told, oh, yes, you do. Then I even had an allergist tell me, like, we don't really even know what's going on, to tell you the truth. It's just the best way is to do what you're doing and self-biohack, and just if you feel something, stay away from those, like avoidance. So I'm like, okay, ever since I started clearing up all those food allergies, the best I've ever felt. And since then, I've just basically listened to my body. And anytime I have any type of gut issues, I journal it down, and basically avoidance is all I got. I don't know how allergies ties in with like IBS, but everything is microbiome, right? And taking care of it. So.
Oh, for sure. With like food sensitivities, one of the main causes of that is having what we call a leaky gut,
Yes.
which is where you have tiny microscopic holes in your gut. Most people have some level or degree of leaky gut these days, just because of the world we live in. So stress, pathogens, and not having organic food, which you can find, or afford organic food these days, it's not realistic for a lot of people. Medications, late nights, alcohol, coffee, all these things can lead to damaging the gut, which leads to tiny little holes in the gut, which leads to leakage basically of whatever you've eaten into the bloodstream. So then if you have a piece of carrot, for example, a tiny microscopic piece enters your bloodstream, your body produces an immune response to that. So then not only does the body start attacking that piece of food, it does it every time you eat it, and then it starts attacking itself. So yeah, even if you don't have any obvious symptoms like IBS, it can definitely creep up on you, especially as we enter 30s, 40s, 50s. A lot of the time we get away with what we want to get away with in our 20s, but then things start to change. When we get into our 30s and beyond, we need to take a bit more care of ourselves.
And that's funny because all the stuff I was allergic to was all the stuff I was basically using in excess, and the lifestyle I was living with partying and drinking and everything in my 20s. And I'm like, God, I was allergic to beef, shrimp, milk from pound and whey protein drinks and stuff. And literally those are the things that I became really allergic to later. So that leaky gut, the whole theory just seems like, that's exactly what happened. But you tell that to the Western culture medical doctors and they won't even talk about it.
Yeah, we're in a bit of a war, aren't we, with them at the
But
moment. I think some people are coming around to it, but it's very against the grain of what they tend to think.
so besides like food allergies, just IBS in general, is just IBS a condition that is just a blanket term for anything that's going wrong with the gut, whether it be infections, food allergies, autoimmune diseases? Can you go more into that?
Yeah, sure. So IBS is what we call like an umbrella term. It encompasses lots of different types of symptoms. So there are some screening, like I use the word test very loosely, some like quote unquote tests like ruling out that your doctor should do. So they should check for, you don't have autoimmune, for example, something like Crohn's or celiac is very different to IBS. If you don't have that and you don't have a specific food intolerance, and it's not just that you're eating dairy and then you're intolerant to that. If you don't have an intolerance or anything else going on, then it's just labeled as IBS, like irritable bowel syndrome. But the different types of IBS, I mean, there's so much to it, and this is why it can feel quite confusing and overwhelming for so many people because there's just so many nuances to it. So
Yeah.
one person could have IBS and they have a lot of loose stools. Other person could have the exact same thing, but one person with the loose stools reacts really well to a certain intervention, the other person doesn't, because the causes can be completely different. Someone else might have really bad bloating. So you can have so many different types of symptoms and been given the blanket label, but there's just so much involved in IBS that you just don't really get told by your doctor. So if you're diagnosed with it, it just feels a little bit hopeless for a lot of people.
Yeah. What is the root cause of all of it? Is it just leaky gut?
Great question. I wish I could answer it in a nutshell. So the kind of root cause, I would say there are multiple root causes usually. The gut microbiome is usually at play. So there's going to be an imbalance of, I like to describe it like inside your gut, all over your body, in fact, but mainly in your gut, you have a gut microbiome. So you've got different types of bacteria, viruses, all this kind of stuff making up your gut to keep it healthy. And if you imagine it like a flower bed, you need lots of different diverse types of flowers in there. Some are prettier than others, some do different things. And if you have any damage to that, say you take some antibiotics, for example, you drink too much, you can kill off some of those bacteria. So you end up killing off some beneficial bacteria. Imagine you've like poured some weed killer on some flowers. Now, in the place of those flowers grow some, I don't know, poison ivy or some weeds or something that's more pathogenic, more dangerous. What happens then is you can have an overgrowth of like a negative bacteria that could cause inflammation, could cause constipation, could cause diarrhea. So a lot of the time, the microbiome is involved, and you have to have a very delicate balance and a very specific balance in your gut. So that's one contributing factor. Another is food sensitivities from leaky gut. And another is stress and inflammation in your gut, a lot of the time from stress. And that is the biggest trigger that I've seen in almost all of my clients is stress. And that's why I'm so passionate about talking about the vagus nerve and the role that plays in IBS, because it's so overlooked and not super well understood, but it's one of the biggest things that can trigger your symptom.
Yeah. So let's go into that. Is it basically the whole reason I started doing my diaphragmatic breathing is calming that vagus nerve, getting that stress level down? Because when you're in such high stress all the time, it becomes chronic and it just starts damaging everything. So all these interventions you keep trying to do, they're not working. It's because of that reason.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if we imagine nowadays, we are so out of normal living. Like, we're not supposed to live in these buildings with these harsh fluorescent lights or screens everywhere or constant notifications. We're always in some level of stress state. And I always say to people, because a lot of people say to me, no, I'm not stressed, I don't feel stressed. If you're not fully relaxed and you don't feel some level of like tranquility and fully relaxed, you're in a state of stress. You're in one or the other all the time, right? Most of us, like you and I now, will be in a probably low level stress state because we need that cortisol, like the stress hormone, to motivate us to have this conversation and to think about what we're about to say next, right? So it's not that it's necessarily bad. It's like you say, it's chronic. So if you're not actively relaxing and turning on your, what we call the rest digest nervous system, calming nervous system, you're going to be in a state of stress. And what happens then? People just become accustomed to it. And they think that's like, not to bring back a COVID phrase, but the new normal. That becomes your new norm of some level of stress all the time. So you're right, you could take some probiotics, but actually if you're always in some level of stress, you have stress hormones that can kill your gut bacteria too. It can cause that inflammation. So like trying to put out a fire, but the fire's burning too brightly and you're only sprinkling like a watering can on top of it.
Yeah. So what are like your top ways of calming that nervous system and using methods to work on the vagus nerve?
I'm very big on vagal tone. So a couple of practical things I recommend are whatever works for the person. So basically vagal tone is strengthening the vagus nerve. So I'll talk about a couple of ways, like actual practical ways that people can do this and activate the vagus nerve. But if you don't focus on vagal tone and toning up that vagus nerve, you're not really going to achieve anything, because you could one day notice a flare up and notice you're bloated or notice you've got a bit of a rash or whatever your symptoms tend to be in your health and think, oh, I need to calm down my vagus nerve. But it's kind of like going to the gym, doing a couple of reps on bicep curls and then going home again and doing it once a month. Like, you need to do it consistently. And the more that you practice relaxing and activating your vagus nerve, the stronger it is. So, for example, you could be super jumpy, and someone who, you know, if someone jumps out the corner, you could like jump and be really easily shaken up and scream all the time and jump at horror films. The more you practice relaxing your vagus nerve, you can become more robust, and the same things wouldn't make you so jumpy because you have a better vagal tone. So to get there, a couple of things that I like to recommend are things like humming, singing. They're really good because the vocal cords like stimulate the vagus nerve. And if you're ever feeling super anxious, a lot of the time that can be, if you're not someone who likes mindfulness or sitting still and wants to do something active, singing. I mean, who doesn't love to sing? It's no matter how you sound, right? If you sound awful, it's really good to activate that vagus nerve. Yoga is really good. Some of the positions like downward dog, for example, again, the muscles in your neck, they activate the vagus nerve, so it turns them on. And just getting into that position can be really calming. So if you're somewhere that you can do downward dog, maybe not like in the grocery store, you'll be able to, but that would be good to maybe incorporate daily. It doesn't have to be like a huge 1 hour yoga class. It can just be 5 minutes in the morning and at night. And then, I mean, I'm a huge fan of deep breathing. I think that's really very useful because you're doing something where it's making you be really in touch with your body. So taking really slow, steady, deliberate breaths for like 4 seconds minimum, 4 to 7 seconds, holding it and then releasing it really slowly. Often, especially if you're having like an anxiety attack, you can feel that your breath is communicating to your body, everything's okay. Because if you're shallow breathing, it's telling your body there's danger, right? Because that's how we would respond if we lived in the wild. So if you're breathing slowly, it's telling your body to calm down. And it also helps you notice how tense you were before because you're starting to really tune into your body. So yeah, those are a couple of my favorite ones.
Oh, very cool. And out of those, I mean, I already do the deep breathing at least every night before I go to bed, but if I feel stressed, I'll work on that too. But the humming, I sit there and hum all day long or in my car listening to music because for some reason my brain can't pick up like the lyrics. Like I always listen to the instruments and everything. So you can't really word that. So you hum it to be with the chorus and all that kind of stuff. So I'm already doing that. So that's perfect.
You're just stuck in it. Your vagal tone is perfect then.
Well, now I'm going to work on that in other times during the day now too. So
yeah.
Well, cool. So calming that down and working on the tone of your vagus nerve, that seems like intervention number one. It's just an easy thing everyone should be doing anyway. So taking care of that, then what are some of the other interventions for dealing with IBS? If you got that going, your vagal tone is good, what other things do you recommend or work on with people?
It depends very much on the individual. And this is where IBS, it becomes a bit complex because it is so nuanced and you need to find like what's specific to you. But something I'm quite big on working with clients is around their mindset around IBS. So I talk a lot about before you try to do anything, we need to look at your mindset. So if you are in a stress state, which a lot of people are, but especially with IBS because they don't understand it, they don't know where it's coming from, it can feel quite disempowering and scary because you don't understand your own body. It can feel like a threat. I want people to look at addressing that mindset. So in going from stress state and panic and overwhelm to curiosity mindset, which means literally shifting into a place where you neutralize everything. So instead of thinking, oh my God, it must have been that steak that I ate and that bloated me out and I can never eat steak now. And what am I going to do next time I go out for dinner? Blah, 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 blah. Your mind runs away. You can just shift to, I wonder what caused this. Like, oh, I wonder what's different recently. Just a few like small changes in how you frame the questions can help you to A, calm down and stop being in fight or flight response, but B, it means that you're more able to find out the answer. Because if you're approaching something with curiosity, it literally changes the way that your brain works. So your brain doesn't go into narrow tunnel vision and miss all the other details. It's able to see everything more clearly. And often then you'll find the answer more clearly because you're not, it's like when you're rushing trying to find your keys and you're stressing out running around the house and you don't even realize they're in your hand because you're so stressed you can't see things clearly. So I'm very big on mindset. And then it's the classic things of looking at your gut microbiome, probiotics. How are you eating? Are you eating in a state of stress? Are you deep breathing before you eat? Are you calming your nervous system down? Are you chewing slowly? Like really basic things like that have such a huge impact on whether or not you get bloated, whether or not you get constipation. We're very sedentary nowadays. Are you walking often throughout the day? How many steps are you taking? All these kinds of things. Because if you're not moving your body, your gut's not going to be moving either and everything's going to get very stuck. So there can be some quite easy, free things that you can try first to just improve your digestion overall.
Yeah. And then after that, do you do any testing or microbiome testing? I know there's a few different companies out there. I recently did one and saw the microbiome and what we think each bacteria is supposed to be at and how much concentration and everything. And I had great results from taking supplements to offset some of that stuff, but it still was more of going through my doctor. It was like, yeah, these are the things that we think, but like nothing is really concrete. And I think we're a few decades away from mastering it.
Yeah, for sure. Was the testing through like your physician or was it like a private nutritional type lab?
I have a concierge doctor and he's very progressive, holistic, but still Western medical trained. But he did it through a company called Rupa Health. And then that test came from, I guess it's called Diagnostic Solutions. But I can't even refer my audience because my doctor can't see anyone other than people in California. So I have to tell them, you got to go find your own DPC or maybe a holistic person that hopefully can do that same test.
Yeah, I think testing wise, I mean, Genova is quite good. I know they're US based as well, so Genova.
Okay.
I think you have to also get it read by like a nutritionist, so you could find a test, but probably also need it to be interpreted. But yeah, testing is a really useful tool. I don't tend to recommend people start off with that. Usually what you can do with people with IBS is when I see a client, we'll do a whole entire health history and we'll look at their health since they were a baby and their family's health, anything that's hereditary, genetic, what kind of was going on at the time it was triggered, what are the antecedents, so what led up to this, was there a lot of trauma and stress, because that's going to be a huge impact on the vagus nerve and the nervous system, which impacts the gut. Was there a lot of antibiotic use? Was there a lot of alcohol drinking in your teens and 20s? When you start to unpick that stuff and you notice what was happening leading up to IBS and then what triggered it at the time. So was it you were studying for uni and you were really stressed? Was it a traumatic breakup? Was it after you got food poisoning? You can then start to see what was probably going on and deduce what's probably the main trigger. And then you can look at trying some approaches without having to do testing. There are general strains that you can try, like lactobacilli and bifidobacterium, that are quite useful in a lot of people with IBS. And for some people, that will be enough, and just some lifestyle changes and food changes. If it gets to the point where there's no changes being made or the symptoms are really stubborn, then I would recommend testing, because that can indicate maybe you've got a very specific overgrowth of like a pathogenic bacteria or an undergrowth of something that you need. That's where testing can come really handy, because you can see, is it something we need to pinpoint very specifically and work on, rather than some more general kind of approaches that can work for a lot of people.
Yeah. Do you recommend people try probiotics first, or do everything we talked about first, then maybe even do a microbiome test? Because some people think you're just throwing fuel to the fire, possibly because you don't really know that probiotic and the amounts of everything and what it's going to do to your current counts. Maybe something's off and you're just adding more to it.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Again, it's annoying, but it does depend on the individual.
Yeah.
I think it depends on your severity of symptoms. And for example, if you had something like mucus in your stools or very intense symptoms, I would say probiotic isn't necessarily going to impact that. That's probably more get checked out by your physician and then have a microbiome test. For some people, it is literally like we just have our microbiomes are just a bit crap because they are damaged through the food that we eat, through the stress that we have, and a specific type of probiotic that's been researched and shown to be useful in IBS can be useful for a lot of people. So not everyone will need testing. We've got a brand over in the UK called Octavia, Optibac, and they research all of their probiotics and they look at what are the best strains for IBS, diarrhea, or constipation, or that kind of stuff. So you can tend to use that, and that can sometimes be enough, as well as all the lifestyle stuff and the stress. But if it's more intense or severe symptoms, then usually you have to have more in-depth testing just to see what's going on.
Yeah. And what do you think about all these like fitness trackers like the Whoop? And I had a guy on my podcast, I guess, a doctor from Norway, I believe, and he was real about the Garmin even being better than the Whoop for specifically stress, even though the Whoop shows my stress score. And it's funny because I solved a lot of my food intolerances or allergies or whatever they were, that they were causing me issues. And I took supplements after we did that microbiome test, and I fixed almost all of them except for my worst allergy, which is milk protein. Mm-hmm. And I will still see, anytime I just say screw it and have something with cheese in it and all that, and I will see my stress spike on here right after eating the meal. So I was like, wow, it does catch that. And then, of course, alcohol. I still like having some fun, way more moderated than in my 20s. But every weekend when I start within the hour and for the rest of the day, I will see my stress score up. So it looks like it correlates perfect. But have you looked into that or recommend that to clients at all?
I don't tend to utilize those, only because, I mean, I think a lot of people I know do use them and they love them. For me personally, I know that I would just get too obsessed with it and it would become an anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah, you end up becoming obsessed with it. But I think a lot of the time, for people who I work with, just starting to get in touch with your body in general and starting to notice these things in general is enough. I think if you want to go a level deeper and you really want to be serious about it, and then those health trackers can be really useful. But sometimes just a few basic changes can really make all the difference. And a lot of people are just so out of touch with their bodies anyway, that just doing literally deep breathing. And then they're like, oh, I never realized how stressed I was until I started that. It's such a small thing, but it just makes people become so much more in touch with their bodies and what they're eating and how they're living. That makes a big enough change in and of itself. But yeah, for me personally, I would just become too obsessed with it, I think.
Yeah, I've just done a lot with exactly that, like journaling. And I used to have a journal, write it all down, different pages. And now I'm just using more the new age stuff like Microsoft Notes. So I have a page for each problem. Like, did you feel bad after eating something? And I start tracking it. And that's how I discovered a lot of the things. And also like feeling happy, feeling sad, like having little things. And over time, I start seeing correlations. Oh my God, I'm doing my own little biohacking here. And it's paying attention. I never paid attention prior to being forward.
Yeah, creeps up on you and you forget that we've taken our health for granted for so long because we can. And I see it in my sister now, who's just turned, she's 18. And I think, oh, I remember those days when I could just do what I wanted and not really think about it. But you do start to, I try to reframe it to people that it's not a chore, it's more of a privilege that we can do this. Like we can use these tools and start to notice our health and prioritize it, because there are a lot of people in a lot of situations who don't even have the resources to eat healthy. So it is more of a privilege that we can do that. And just trying to shift your mindset around that and see it as a positive thing can make it more enjoyable rather than feel like you have to restrict something or make it more of a chore.
Exactly. Well, Atavia, any final thoughts before we get into how my people can contact you and find you on social media?
Yeah,
Anything
sure.
upcoming?
Yeah, of course. So I'm active on Instagram. I'll give you the handle in the show notes because my name is super long. It's Atavia.Minoudis. No one's going to know how to spell that. Very Greek. And I also have an IBS podcast called Gut Reactions. And this year I'm launching a IBS rehab program. So I'm working with people specifically on giving everyone the knowledge of the basics of IBS, debunking all the myths that you've heard, especially from doctors, what actually is IBS, all the different key factors, and some sort of like a journal prompt. So helping you to deal with any trigger, understand what's caused it, and essentially get to a place where they can live mostly symptom free. So yeah, if that interests you, come and follow me on Instagram or look up the podcast. And yeah, it'll be launched this year.
Awesome. And then any one last final thought of what people can start doing tomorrow? Just an easy hack. Would it be just humming or breathing, or what's like one of the simplest things you can start doing?
Simplest thing, especially for your nervous system. And if you want to take your health seriously, any area of your health, your nervous system and gut should definitely be top of your agenda. I would say, yes, the deep breathing, mindfulness, but honestly, I would say 30 minutes as soon as you wake up, don't go on your phone. 30 minutes before bed, don't go on your phone, because that is the biggest source of dopamine and cortisol. And the minute you start engaging with your phone, the more you're going to start to become addicted to that and your stress levels are going to rise. So that would be my final advice, is try to go at least 30 minutes after waking up without even looking at your phone.
Yeah, that's good advice. It's hard to do.
It
I
is.
definitely am able to do that in the morning, and plus staying away from coffee at least for a couple hours to let my
Yeah.
natural levels go up. But at night, man, I'm TikTok doom scrolling, so it's hard to give that up.
It is. And also when you've been on it through the day, that's where the dopamine then comes in. So at night it is harder to put it down. You can notice the difference so much. So all the more reason, get yourself a safe and lock it in there every night or something.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, my audience knows I'll put all those links in the show notes so it's easy clickable, but it's awesome that you kind of picked one specific thing to be an expert at. And that's when people have these issues, they're desperate to look for someone that is not a know-it-all, know everything, but just one thing. And so in my mind now, you are that person for that. So that's great. And I love the fact that you have the podcast too and doing the same thing. So I'd like to thank you for coming on my show and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.